That one thing indeed. As if that one thing wasn't enough all by itself. Plenty, plenty, only he wasn't guilty of it. How you talk, not guilty of it. Everybody knows he was guilty. Mary, I give you my word he was innocent. I can't believe it, and I don't. How do you know? It is a confession. I am ashamed, but I will make it. I was the only man who knew he was innocent. I could have saved him, and, well, you know how the town was wrought up? I hadn't the pluck to do it. It would have turned everyone against me. I felt mean, ever so mean, but I didn't dare. I hadn't the manliness to face that. Mary looked troubled, and for a while was silent. Then she said stammeringly, I don't think it would have done for you to, one mustn't, public opinion, one has to be so careful. It was a difficult road, and she got mired, but after a little she got started again. It was a great pity, but why, we couldn't afford it, Edward. We couldn't indeed. Oh, I wouldn't have had you do it for anything. It would have lost us the goodwill of so many people, Mary. And then what troubles me now is what he thinks of us, Edward. He doesn't suspect that I could have saved him. Oh, exclaimed the wife in a tone of relief. I am glad of that, as long as he doesn't know that you could have saved him. That makes it a great deal better. Why, I might have known he didn't know, because he is always trying to be friendly with us, as little encouragement as we give him. More than once, people have twitted me with it. There's the Wilsons and the Wilcoxes and the Harknesses. They take a mean pleasure in saying, your friend, Burgess, because they know it pesters me. I wish he wouldn't persist in liking us so. I can't think why he keeps it up. I can explain it. It's another confession. When the thing was new and hot, and the town made a plan to ride him on a rail, my conscience hurt me so that I couldn't stand it. And I went privately and gave him notice, and he got out of the town and stayed out till it was safe to come back. Edward, if the town had found it out, don't. It scares me yet to think of it. I repented of it the minute it was done, and I was even afraid to tell you, lest your face might betray it to somebody. I didn't sleep any that night, for worrying. But after a few days I saw that no one was going to suspect me, and after that I got to feeling glad I did it. And I feel glad yet, Mary. Glad through and through. So do I now, for it would have been a dreadful way to treat him. Yes, I'm glad, for really you did owe him that, you know. But, Edward, suppose it should come out yet some day. It won't. Why? Because everybody thinks it was Goodson. Of course they would, certainly. And of course he didn't care. They persuaded poor old Salisbury to go and charge it on him. And he went blustering over there and did it. Goodson looked him over, like as if he was hunting for a place on him that he could despise the most. Then he says, so you are the committee of inquiry, are you? Salisbury said that was about what he was. Did they require particulars, or do you reckon a kind of a general answer will do? If they require particulars, I will come back, Mr. Goodson. I will take the general answer first. Very well. Then tell them to go to hell. I reckon that's general enough. And I'll give you some advice, Salisbury. When you come back, for the particulars, fetch a basket to carry the relics of yourself home in. Very snotty. Just like Goodson, it's got all the marks. He had only one vanity. He thought he could give advice better than any other person. It settled the business and saved us, Mary. The subject was dropped. Bless you, I'm not doubting that. Then they took up the gold sack mystery again, with strong interest. Soon the conversation began to suffer breaks, interruptions, caused by absorbed thinkings. The breaks grew more and more frequent. At last, Richards lost himself wholly in thought. He sat long gazing vacantly at the floor, and by he began to punctuate his thoughts with little nervous movements of his hands that seemed to indicate vexation. Meantime, his wife too had relapsed into a thoughtful silence, and her movements were beginning to show a troubled discomfort. Finally, Richards got up and strode aimlessly about the room, plowing his hands through his hair, much as a somnambulist might do who was having a bad dream. Then he seemed to arrive at a definite purpose, and without a word he put on his hat and passed quickly out of the house. His wife sat brooding with a drawn face and did not seem to be aware that she was alone. Now and then she murmured, "Lead us not into temptation, but, oh, we are so poor, so poor." After a little she glanced up and muttered in a half-frightened, half-glad way, "He is gone. He is gone. But oh dear, he may be too late. Maybe not. Maybe there is still time." She rose and stood thinking, nervously clasping and unclasping her hands. A slight shudder shook her frame, and she said out of a dry throat, "God forgive me. It's awful to think such things, but Lord, how we are made. How strangely we are made." She turned the light low and slipped stealthily over and kneeled down by the sack and felt of its ridgy sides with her hands and fondled them lovingly, and there was a gloating light in her poor old eyes. She fell into fits of absence and came half out of them at times to mutter, "If we had only waited, oh, if we had only waited a little and not been in such a hurry." Meantime, Cox had gone home from his office and told his wife all about the strange thing that had happened, and they had talked it over eagerly and guessed that the late Goodson was the only man in the town who could have helped a suffering stranger with so noble a sum as $20. Then there was a pause, and the two became thoughtful and silent, and by nervous and fidgety. At last the wife said, as if to herself, "Nobody knows this secret but the Richardses, and us. Nobody." The husband came out of his thinkings with a slight start and gazed wistfully at his wife, whose face was become very pale. Then he hesitatingly rose and glanced furtively at his hat, then at his wife, a sort of mute inquiry. Mrs. Cox swallowed once or twice with her hand at her throat. Then, in place of speech, she nodded her head. In a moment, she was alone and mumbling to herself. And now Richards and Cox were hurrying through the deserted stores from opposite directions. They met, panting, at the foot of the printing office stairs. By the nightlight there, they read each other's face. Cox whispered, "Nobody knows about this but us." The whispered answer was, "Not a soul. On honor, not a soul. If it isn't too late." The men were starting upstairs. At this moment, they were overtaken by a boy. And Cox asked, "Is that you, Johnny?"
"Yes, sir."
"You needn't ship the early mail, nor any mail. Wait till I tell you."
"It's already gone, sir."
"Gone!" It had the sound of an unspeakable disappointment in it.
"Yes, sir. Timetable for Brixton and all the towns beyond changed today, sir. Had to get the papers in 20 minutes earlier than common. I had to rush."
If I had been 2 minutes later, the men turned and walked slowly away. Not waiting to hear the rest, neither of them spoke during 10 minutes. Then Cox said in a vexed tone, "What possessed you to be in such a hurry?" "I can't make it out. The answer was humble enough. I see it now, but somehow I never thought, you know, until it was too late. But the next time be hanged, it won't come in 1,000 years." Then the friends separated without a good night and dragged themselves home with the gait of mortally stricken men. At their homes, their wives sprang up with an eager, "Well?" then saw the answer with their eyes and sank down, sorrowing, without waiting for it to come in words. In both houses a discussion followed of a heated sort, a new thing. There had been discussions before, but not heated ones, not ungentle ones. The discussions tonight were a sort of seeming plagiarisms of each other. Mrs. Richards said, "If you had only waited, Edward, if you had only stopped to think. But no, you must run straight to the printing office and spread it all over the world. It said publish it. That is nothing. It also said do it privately if you like. There now, is that true or not?" "Why, yes, it is true. But when I thought what a stir it would make, and what a compliment it was to Hadleyburg that a stranger should trust it so—" "Oh, certainly, I know all that. But if you had only stopped to think, you would have seen that you couldn't find the right man because he is in his grave and hasn't left chick nor child nor relation behind him. And as long as the money went to somebody that awfully needed it, nobody would be hurt by it, and she broke down crying. Her husband tried to think of some comforting thing to say, and presently came out with this: "But after all, Mary, it must be for the best." It must be. We know that. And we must remember that it was so ordered. Ordered! Oh, everything's ordered when a person has to find some way out. When he has been stupid, just the same, it was ordered that the money should come to us in this special way, and it was you that must take it on yourself to go meddling with the designs of Providence. And who gave you the right? It was wicked. That is what it was, just blasphemous presumption, and no more becoming to a meek and humble professor of... But Mary, you know how we have been trained all our lives long, like the whole village, till it is absolutely second nature to us to stop not a single moment to think when there's an honest thing to be done. Oh, I know it. I know it. It's been one everlasting training and training and training in honesty. Honesty shielded from the very cradle against every possible temptation. And so it's artificial honesty, and weak as water when temptation comes, and we have seen this night. God knows I never had shade nor shadow of a doubt of my petrified and indestructible honesty until now. And now, under the very first big and real temptation, Edward, it is my belief that this town's honesty is as rotten as mine is, as rotten as yours is. It is a mean town, a hard, stingy town, and hasn't a virtue in the world but this honesty it is so celebrated for and so conceited about. And so help me, I do believe that if ever the day comes that its honesty falls under great temptation, its grand reputation will go to ruin like a house of cards. There now. I've made confession, and I feel better. I am a humbug, and I've been one all my life without knowing it. Let no one call me honest again. I will not have it. Well, Mary, I feel a good deal as you do. I certainly do. It seems strange, too. So strange, I never could have believed it. Never. A long silence followed. Both were sunk in thought. At last the wife looked up and said, "I know what you are thinking, Edward. Richard's had the embarrassed look of a person who is caught." "I am ashamed to confess it, Mary, but it's no matter, Edward. I was thinking the same question myself." "I hope so. State it." "You were thinking if a body could only guess out what the remark was that Goodson made to the stranger." "It's perfectly true. I feel guilty and ashamed. And you?" "I'm past it. Let us make a pallet here. We've got to stand watch till the bank vault opens in the morning and admits the sack. Oh dear, if we hadn't made the mistake." The pallet was made, and Mary said, "The open sesame, what could it have been? I do wonder what the remark could have been. But come, we will get to bed now, and sleep." No, think. Yes, Mary, think. By this time the Coxes, too, had completed their spat and their reconciliation, and were turning in, to think and toss and fret and worry over what the remark could possibly have been, which Goodson made to the stranded derelict. That golden remark, that remark worth $40,000 cash. The reason that the village telegraph office was open later than usual that night was this. The foreman of Cox's paper was the local representative of the Associated Press. One might say its honorary representative, for it wasn't 4 times a year that he could furnish 30 words that would be accepted, but this time it was different. His dispatch stating what he had caught got an instant answer. Send the whole thing, all the details, 1,200 words. A colossal order. The foreman filled the bill, and he was the proudest man in the state. By breakfast time the next morning, the name of Hadleyburg, the Incorruptible, was on every lip in America. From Montreal to the Gulf, from the glaciers of Alaska to the orange groves of Florida, and millions of people were discussing the stranger and his money sack, and wondering if the right man would be found, and hoping some more news about the matter would come soon, right away. Stay tuned for Chapter 2.